I'm Cath. My channel is Made by Cath Craft. Welcome to the latest episode of my midweek sewing chat. I've got lots to talk about in this video, so I'm really looking forward to getting started and sharing with you what I've been up to on the sewing front over the last week. I've got a couple of sewing projects that I've completed, so I'm really looking forward to sharing those. And I've got a new project underway, so I'll be talking all about that too. I've also got a tutorial video that I'm planning on popping at the end of this video. It's one that was requested by somebody on here, and I really enjoyed putting it together, so I'm hoping it'll be helpful. So I'll talk all about the details of that later in this video. And I've got a couple of new sewing tools that have been arriving over the last week or so I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. I've put a couple to use already and I'm really enjoying using them, so yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting about those too. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video, but as usual I'll start off with what I'm wearing today. And I'm in a really good mood today because the sun is shining outside. It is a really lovely day, and I think looking at the forecast here, it looks like we're going to have a mini heat wave this week. It's not really warm today, but it looks like by Friday the temperature should be about 30 degrees, which is really warm for here and quite exciting, especially because last year our British summer was a bit of a washout. So I'm going to be delving in my cupboard later this week and hopefully getting out some really summery items to wear, which will be really nice. But like I said, today is lovely and summery, but it's lovely and sunny, but it's not really warm. So I've got on a dress that's perfect for this weather where it's starting to warm up, but yeah, not sort of boiling by any means. This dress is one of my favourite patterns, or I made it using one of my favourite patterns, which is this pattern here. Oh, I've got it upside down. It is the Hinterland dress pattern by Sew Liberated. It's a really nice woven dress pattern, one I find really comfy to wear. I'll show you the line drawings, they're quite tiny, but I can hold them up quite large so you can see. It is a woven dress pattern with a gathered skirt, and it's got a button placket that you can either just have on the bodice, or you can take it all the way down the skirt, and there are different skirt lengths too, and inseam pockets. Then it's got this slight scoop neckline, and it's got a bodice, it's got darts on the bust, which gives a bit of shaping, and you can either make it as a sleeveless version, which has a nice bias binding finish to finish off the sleeveless version, or you can make it with a sleeve, either a longer sleeve or sort of shorter sleeve. So there are a few different options built in. There are also optional waist ties if you want to cinch it in a bit around the waist, but if you don't add the waist ties, it ends up being quite a relaxed fit loose dress. So it's a really comfy one to wear. And I think I might have only made 2 patterns by Sew Liberated, but I find their instructions really nice to follow. They're really clear, and I think the finish on their garments always comes out really nicely. And the Hinterland dress has a really good size range too. I've got the pay pattern, which goes from a 0 to 24, but if you go on their website and download the PDF version, that comes in a size range of up to 34, which is for a bust of 58.5 inches and a waist of 52.5 inches. I think I've always sized down on this pattern because it is designed to be a little bit oversized and a little bit loose. So when I've made my versions, because I think I've made maybe 3 or 4 versions of this one, because I do love it, I've always gone for the size 0, and that's designed for a bust of 31 inches and a waist of 25 inches and hips of 33.5 inches, and I am 26, 36. And I don't think the hip measurement's as critical on this one because it's a gathered skirt with plenty of room, but my bust and waist measurement are 1 inch larger than that size, but I think there's still plenty of room, and I have added waist ties to my version, but I can still pull it on over my head easily without having to undo the buttons. They are real buttons, but I don't really need them to be real buttons. I could have easily not bothered with the buttonholes and just sewn them through because I can get it on over my head. But yeah, this is my version I'm wearing today. So I've gone for the short sleeved version and the sort of above the knee length, and I've added on the waist ties to cinch in at the waist. I'll stand up a bit so you can see the waist tie there at the back. And it's got the nice scoop neck. I'll sort of pull my hair back because I'm conscious sometimes in these videos I'm talking about the neckline and I don't show it off fully, so it's a nice scoop neck. And I made it in this really nice cotton linen blend fabric that I got, it must have been a couple of years ago, from Sew Me Sunshine. So I don't think they've got it in stock anymore. It's a really nice cotton linen blend. I do love a cotton linen blend. I find it's really nice. It kind of has a bit of it feels like it's got the lovely texture and the breathability of linen, but also maybe it feels a bit more durable maybe than a straight linen. I don't know whether that is the case, but yeah, I really like it. It's not super duper lightweight, so it's nice for this weather where there's still a bit of a breeze if you go outside. And it's in like a navy blue and white colour, although I think on the camera it almost looks black. And then I had fun with the buttons on this one. I've gone for yellow buttons just for a little pop of colour. So I'll put a picture up of me wearing it so you can see what it looks like. I can't remember if I lengthened the bodice on this one. I wonder if I can have a little look and see. Yeah, I lengthened the bodice by 1 inch because I think it does come up quite short. So you can see on the picture now how it sits on me, and I'm 5'6" for reference. Yeah, so I lengthened the bodice by 1 inch, pulled it in a bit with the waist ties. I've got the pockets. It's a really nice, comfy, relaxed one to wear. I just wore it out this morning with a pair of flip-flops because we were in a bit of a rush on the school run. I didn't have time to find a pair of socks so I could put on a pair of trainers, but that is what I'm wearing today. I'll move on now to sharing with you what I've been up to over the last week or so on the sewing front. And the first thing I've got to share is a completed sewing project, and it's one I worked on this weekend that's just gone with my daughter, which is really nice. If you saw my last week's midweek sewing chat episode, you'll know the weekend before last, my son and I worked on a sewing project together, which was lovely because my son is not often so keen on getting involved in crafty projects, so I really enjoyed that time together, working on the project together. And we decided to make a basic cushion cover with a zip, which is a nice project for him to get involved in because it meant he could really get involved in all stages of the project because it was quite a simple project. So he really felt like he owned the project, and he was really pleased when he finished the cushion. And I'll show you, in case you didn't see my last week's video, the cushion my son and I made together. Here it is. It's in this really cool Mario Kart cotton fabric. We had this fabric at home. It was left over from a project my son and I worked on together at least a couple of years ago. So it was really nice to be able to use the leftover fabric, and he's really pleased with this cushion. It's got a zip there. So that was my son's cushion, and to be able to complete this project I had to order a new cushion pad to go inside. We didn't have any at home, the right size. But when I looked on the internet to try and find a cushion pad the right size, I could only find a pack of 2. So I ordered a 2-pack, so I had 1 spare cushion pad. So I thought that's not too much trouble because we do get through cushions every now and then. I often, when they've gone flat, I often replace the cushion cover, and the old cushion pad I'll open up and sort of re-fluff the filling and use to stuff knitted toys or other knitted things I'm making, so it's quite nice to be able to reuse it. But I had 1 cushion pad left over, so I said to my daughter, would she fancy making a cushion cover too? And historically, she's not been so keen on getting involved in sewing activities. I have asked her a few times and she hasn't really wanted to. And she's only 6, I guess, so she's still quite small. There's plenty of time for her to learn to sew still. But this time she actually said yes, she would like to make a cushion cover too. So I was really pleased and that she wanted to get involved. I think maybe because she'd just seen her brother do it and he'd got a new cushion for his room, she wanted to have the same. So that worked really well. So this weekend we decided to sit down together and work on her cushion cover. So I've got her cushion here, and this fabric is actually left over from a new project that I'm working on at the moment, and I over-ordered on the fabric slightly. I'll explain why a little bit later. But it worked quite well because there was enough left over to make this cushion cover for her in fabric she really likes. So I'll show you the cushion my daughter and I worked on, and here it is. So she's a big fan of pink and unicorns, so this fabric was perfect for her. It's got a pale pink background with these unicorns and castles and rainbows. It's really, really cute. And we decided for her, instead of making a cushion with the same fabric on both sides like my son, we went for a pink, hot pink back, just as sort of a bit of a feature. I think it works really nicely actually. So this is her cushion. We actually ended up inserting the zip slightly differently to my son's cushion. For my son's cushion I had an invisible zip just in my stash, which is quite handy, so we used that. And we kind of made it with, so you can't see any sewing lines on the outside where the zip's been inserted. Now for my daughter we did it slightly differently. The only reason was because I was sort of lost concentration as we were doing it and ended up doing a different method, and I didn't think about the way I'd done my son. So yeah, we ended up doing a slightly different method. So this is her zip here. And you can see instead, you can see the stitching line down the side, and it's kind of almost got a flap that covers the zip. And that works quite well actually because this is a non-invisible zip. I just got this from my local haberdashery store. It's kind of a standard zip. So I think it works quite nice as a little flap that almost covers it slightly. But yeah, it's just a slightly different method, but both work perfectly fine. They were just slightly different. So yeah, this is her cushion, and it turned out really nicely, I think. And she really enjoyed getting involved actually, so it was lovely. She had a go of using the presser foot on my machine. I turned it down to slow so it didn't go too fast. And she even had a go of using the presser foot on my overlocker while I kind of fed the fabric through to finish the edges on the inside, and she thought that was hilarious because it made so much noise, and she actually enjoyed pressing that quite fast, so I was having to kind of keep up feeding this fabric through as she was going through the overlocker. But anyway, the cushion turned out really nicely, and she's got that one in her room now too, so it was lovely to do some sewing with them both. I'm hoping I might be able to get them involved in a few more sewing projects going forward. So if you have any particular favourite sewing projects that you've liked to make with your children or grandchildren, I'd love to know, just for some ideas of simple things where they can get involved in quite a lot of the process through, so they really feel like they've done it themselves. But that was my first sewing project. So the next sewing project that I completed this week is a dressmaking project for me. And I talked about this one in last week's video, but I hadn't finished it then. So I was really glad that I was able to finish it this week so I could share it with you now. And it's a hack of this pattern here, which is the Ogden cami pattern by True Bias, which is a really nice woven top pattern. So this cami top here that's quite loose fitting, you can just slip it on over your head, there are no zips or fastenings, and it's got this deep V at the front and back and spaghetti straps, and it comes in two size ranges, a US 0 to 18 and a 14 to 30, and the 14 to 30 is just slightly different, it has bust darts and slightly wider straps. But it's got a really simple shape to it, which makes it really easy to hack, and I think it's a really fun one to hack too. So I've done a few different hacks, and my latest hack was to hack it to make a midi dress. And I've mentioned in a few recent videos, I've really been coming round to the midi length recently after initially thinking maybe it wouldn't suit me. I find it's a really nice length to wear actually because it kind of covers your legs up a little bit from the sun or to keep you warm on a slightly cooler day. But it's not sort of full maxi length, so it's a bit more practical to wear, I think, than something that you might risk sort of dipping in a puddle or getting dirty or that sort of thing. So I'm really enjoying the midi length, so I thought it'd be fun to try hacking the Ogden cami to turn into midi length dress. And I used some really lovely fabric that I got from Self-Made, and I'll link the fabric down below because I think it still is in stock. It's a lovely viscose in this leopard print, and I really like the sort of scale and colours in the leopard print. And I know that Self-Made viscose fabrics are really nice quality, so I thought I'd go for that and make this dress. And here is my midi dress, which is hard to see on the camera because it's quite long, but you can see it's all here. I've got a ruffle at the bottom. It's quite hard to see actually, but it's just there. You can see the ruffle there. So you can see there's a ruffle length. I've got the main skirt and the bodice. Oh, it's got tangled now, but I'll hold up again. And I've also added in waist ties as well, which are getting tangled too. So here are the waist ties at the side. And I really enjoyed working on this actually. It's always fun to do a hack, I think, because it gets me thinking. So basically to make this hack, I sort of cropped off the Ogden cami just above my or just around my natural waist, and then added on the seam allowance once I decided what length I wanted it to be. I sewed up the top and I cut out, instead of cutting out a facing, which the actual cami itself has, I cut out 2 fronts and 2 backs so I can make a fully lined bodice, and I sort of slip stitched the inside onto the skirt once I'd attached the skirt. And then I added in waist ties into the side seam, quite skinny long waist ties because I thought they'd suit they sort of match with the little skinny straps, just so you can cinch in a little bit at the waist. I did widen the straps just slightly, only by smidgen, just to give a little bit more bra strap coverage on them. And I've got a little label here, or a little piece of ribbon I added at the back so I can tell which way round it is, because I find it really hard to tell this pattern. And I raised the back slightly as well, just because I find once you start cropping it off, the back is a really deep V and it can end up a bit too deep. So I brought the back up, I think, by about an inch or so. And then I added on 2 tiers of gathered skirts. And I'm really pleased how it turned out, and I tried to make it all finished really neatly inside. So obviously the bodice is, and the seams are all enclosed because it's fully lined. And then on the tier at the bottom, instead of overlocking the gathering there, I decided to make some bias binding out the same fabric. I had enough left over and I've enclosed that seam using some bias binding. So I'm hoping this dress will last really well. I really enjoyed sewing this one and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And I'll put a picture up so you can see what it looks like on me and the final length I went for, and also the sort of final proportion of the 2 tiers. I did cut both tiers a little bit longer, so I had a bit of wiggle room and I could kind of crop them off to just the length I wanted. But yeah, I'm really happy with where it's ended up. And in terms of the gathering, I went for a slightly less gathering around this waistline seam here because I didn't want it to be too bulky on that seam. And then I made a bit more gathering, so I made a slightly wider proportion on the bottom tier just to give it a bit of extra swish and really showcase that ruffle at the bottom. And I'm thinking of maybe writing a blog post explaining how I calculated each tier and the lengths and that sort of thing, in case that'll be something of interest. So I might write that blog post up at some point too. But yeah, I really enjoyed making this one, and I might be able to wear it out later this week, hopefully, if we get this really hot weather that seems to be coming our way. So keep your fingers crossed for me there. So now that I've finished my Ogden cami midi dress hack, I've got a couple of new sewing projects in the pipeline, which is good because I'm really terrible without a project. I do like to have something to keep me busy on an evening. So the first projects I've got planned are a couple of dressmaking projects, but the fabric hasn't arrived for them yet. I'm hoping the fabric will arrive later this week so I can share the fabric and a bit about my plans in next week's video, because I'm really looking forward to getting started on those dressmaking projects. But in the meantime, I'm working on another sewing project, and it is a quilting project. And if you've watched previous episodes of my midweek sewing chat, you'll know a few weeks ago I went on a quilting course at my local sewing studio, which is Sewsfaction. I'm quite lucky to live quite close to Sewsfaction, but I've never done one of their courses before. But a friend asked me if I fancied joining her on this introduction to quilting course. And quilting's something I've been interested in trying for ages. It's something I've admired on Instagram so many times and just wasn't sure where to get started. So I thought if I did this introduction to quilting class, it'd be a great way to learn the basics and then be able to build from there. So it was a 2-day class, and over the course of the 2 days, we learnt the basics of quilting. By the end of the 2 days, we all came out with our own mini quilt, which was so much fun to put together. And I've got my mini quilt here, so I can show you it in case you haven't seen it already. This is a mini quilt I made, and I made it for my daughter because I thought it'd be really nice for her to be able to use when she's playing, either as just like a playing mat or for her dolls and teddies. And she's actually used it loads already, so I'm really pleased that she's pleased with it and yeah, has been able to get some use out of it because it's nice that it's useful. So I had loads of fun putting this together. But after the quilting course, I thought I'd like to do some more quilting, just to kind of reinforce my knowledge and know that I can kind of go through the processes on my own at home without the tutor there to sort of help you. So I thought it'd be really nice to make another quilt. And so what I've decided to do is make a quilt for both my son and daughter to put on their beds. So kind of like a single bed size quilt. And I'm basically planning to use the same sort of style of quilt as I've done here, with these little squares on it and the border and the bias binding, and basically scale it up. So I'm kind of following the same process, but for a larger size. So I'm hoping it'll go okay, and we'll end up with 2 nice quilts for them to use, and they're quite excited about having them. So yeah, fingers crossed it'll go okay. So you might recognise the fabric on here from the cushion my daughter and I made, that I showed earlier in this video. And we use this fabric here on the cushion, and then this pink, hot pink that I've used in the border here. And the reason I have some of that fabric left over is because my daughter basically wanted a larger version of this for her quilt on her bed. So I went ahead and ordered some more of these fat quarters. And they're really pretty fabrics on these fat quarters. Actually, I'll show you on the back because it's easier to see large scale here. So it's this lovely sort of unicorn and rainbow and castle print, like on the cushion. And then there's also these little heart prints, one in a darker sort of dusky pink colour and one in a white. And there's also a white print of the unicorn too. So I ordered these fat quarters. They came from Higgs & Higgs, and I ordered more for the large quilt. And so far on my daughter's quilt, I've cut out all of these squares and pieced them together and basically created the front of the quilt. So I'll show you in a moment. But I'm still a bit new to calculating how much fabric I need, so I slightly over-ordered on the fat quarters, which is why we had plenty left over for the cushion, so it ends up being a good thing. But here is my daughter's quilt and how the progress I've made so far. It is a lot bigger than this quilt, but it has been the same process and it's gone okay fairly smoothly so far. So here's the quilt front, as you can see, the same hot pink border. And at the moment I've just got this quilt front, it's all pressed and ready to now be attached to the wadding and the backing so I can start the actual quilting process. That's what I'm planning to do next on this one. So it's really fun actually, and it's been okay, and I haven't come into too many problems so far. It's all gone quite smoothly on scaling up the quilt, and I'm really enjoying actually working my way through it. I find quilting really methodical and quite satisfying just to sort of kind of cut the squares in the evening. I find it quite mindful. So that's my daughter's quilt, and then for my son, I had a chat with him about what he might like, and we decided to go for a sort of Minecraft style quilts, Minecraft inspired, based on the Minecraft colours and the sort of pixelated Minecraft sort of image. So I'm in the process of making my son's quilt squares to be able to put together into the quilt. So I've got a load of different fabrics and different green colours. I had fun choosing them actually. I went down to my local haberdashery shop because I thought it would be much easier to be able to see these fabrics and sort of have a play with them and put them together and see how they worked. So I've gone for a whole load of different green colours for his quilt. I'm going to kind of put them together in a Minecraft pixelated way, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun and turn out nice. And I think they're quite nice, jolly bright colours too, so they should look nice and sort of happy in his room. So that's where I am with my sons. I haven't got quite as far, just because it was easy to order the fabric for my daughter first and then follow up with this one with a visit to the local shop. So yeah, I'll be sharing more about how I'm getting on with those quilts in future videos. But while I'm on now, I thought I'd share with you my sewing tools, which are all quilting tools and that are new that I've been using on these projects, just in case you're interested in those. The first thing I got were a load of these pins, safety pins, which I've mentioned before. They are curved safety pins. I'll get one out so you can see. And they're really handy because when you start attaching the quilt cover to the wadding and the backing, you want it to lie flat as you start to smooth it out. And so because these pins curve, the fabric can stay flat and the pins kind of curve around it. And if you used flat pins or sort of straight pins, the fabric would curve and you might not get such a nice smooth result. So I'm looking forward to using those when I start pinning my front piece to the wadding and to the backing and start kind of smoothing the fabrics all out ready for the actual quilting. So first of all, I got those. They are just by Hemline. I'll hold up the pack so you can see. Hemline curved safety pins. And I'm going to bookmark these on my Amazon shop down below. I've got kind of an Amazon, or it's like a list of my favourite Amazon items. There are lots of sewing tools on there, some knitting tools, some sewing books. And I'll link it down below in case you fancy checking it out, but I'm going to put those on there in case you're interested in those, and also some other items I'm going to talk about now too. So the next new tool I've got for sewing, or for quilting specifically, although I guess it may come in useful for other sewing projects too, is this little tool here. And I've got the packaging here as well, so I can show you it and show you exactly what it is. It is the Clover Hero Marker for applique and sewing. And when we were on the Introduction to Quilting course, the tutor explained a few different ways that you might want to mark on these lines on your fabric before you quilt them, just to make sure you have a nice clear line to follow and can get nice accurate lines when you do come to actually getting to your sewing machine and sewing the lines on. And the way I liked the best was using this little marker. It's basically got a fairly sharp edge here, so you can almost score the fabric slightly to create a little fold or a little crease to follow along when you're making these lines. And I found it created a really nice accurate line. I used it together with a quilting ruler and I found that really nice to follow, so I decided that was my method of choice, and I'm going to be using that little marker to score on all the lines I'm going to follow when I do my bigger quilts. And again, I'll bookmark this as one of my Amazon favourites and link my Amazon favourites list down below in case you're interested in this little tool. It's quite nifty and quite simple, but does a good job. So my next new sewing tool is one I've been wanting for quite a while, because I think it's going to be really handy for my dressmaking as well as my quilting. And it's a quilting ruler. So here is my new quilting ruler. So for dressmaking, I think I'm going to be using this a lot for making alterations to pattern pieces. I often make an adjustment to lengthen things like bodices and sleeves, and historically when I've done that, I'll get the pattern piece and the pattern line, and I use a sort of standard 30cm ruler. And so if I want to increase the bodice length by 1 inch, I'll just measure 1 inch at a few different places along the bodice, and then I'll sort of join up the lines or connect the dots to make that lengthening adjustment. But with the quilting ruler, I won't need to do that because I've got one nice long ruler. I can just measure down by 1 inch and draw the new line along straight across, rather than having to measure at different points and connect the dots. So it should make lengthening adjustments a lot quicker and also a lot more accurate, just being able to use that one line and match up the line on here along the original pattern piece line. So I'm looking forward to using it with dressmaking, and I've already used it a lot with quilting because I've been spending quite a lot of my time cutting up those little squares for my son and daughter's quilts. And the ruler I decided to get, so it's upside down there, I got this from Amazon again, so I'll bookmark it and link it down below. It's by this brand called So Easy. And when I had a look on Amazon, I was reading the reviews of different types of quilting rulers. This one seemed to have lots of good reviews about the quality of the ruler itself. But the reason I went for it particularly is because it's a slightly different shape to some quilting rulers. A lot of quilting rulers seem to be 24 inches long by 6 inches wide. But what I like about this one is it's actually 6.5 inches wide. So you can see there's sort of 6 squares there and an extra half measured down the side. And for the quilt I made recently on my Introduction to Quilting course, these little squares we cut out were 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So I found that using a quilting ruler that had this extra ½ inch down the side was really handy, because you need to measure in and you can use one of these nice clear red lines to mark to the edge of the piece, rather than one of these sort of more fine black lines that aren't quite as clear. So I thought it's quite useful to have a quilting ruler you can either measure in by a set number of inches by, or by a ½ inch measure to. So that's the reason why I got this one, and I'm really pleased with it, and I've used it loads so far and it's working well. So my final new sewing tool I've got to share is probably my favourite one, and it is a new foot for my sewing machine. And I always love having the opportunity to get a new tool or accessory for my machine, because I want to be using my machine for lots of years to come, so it's nice to be building up gradually a collection of different tools that will make it really versatile, and I know I'll get the most and best use out of it. And I've got a Cath Ambition 1.0. It's a really nice machine. I find it really easy to use. I find it tackles everything I throw at it, and what's really cool about it, one of my favourite features, is it has a built-in walking fit, which is called the Cath IDT system. But my new foot is this one here. It is the Cath Perfect 1/4 inch foot with guide for IDT system. And I didn't realise until I took part in the quilting course that for quilting, a 1/4 inch is a really important measurement, because you sew all your seams at a 1/4 inch. this foot is really handy for making sure you get a really accurate 1/4 inch seam, and you can use it for top stitching too. You can see in the diagrams. It's got this little guide here that's a 1/4 inch away from the needle, so you can really get a lot of accuracy in your stitching. You can see here the example is used of top stitching along the quilt pieces, and here of sort of piecing the quilt pieces together. And I've used this foot already and it works really well. It does give a really accurate 1/4 inch, so yeah, I'm really enjoying using it. I'm going to get a lot more use out of it as I sew all of those more green squares together as well. So yeah, that's my last new sewing tool I've got to share. Oh, and I can't remember where I got this foot from, but I'll find out and I'll link it down below. I just googled when I was looking for this particular foot because I knew which one I wanted. So those are my new sewing tools, and that's my new sewing project too, to make 2 quilts, one for my son and one for my daughter. And I'm really enjoying working on those quilts, and I'll share more progress in terms of how I'm getting on with them in future videos. But I've got one more thing still to share in this video, which I mentioned at the beginning, and that is a tutorial. And it's a tutorial to adjust the neckline of this pattern here, which is the cuff top pattern by the assembly line. It's a really nice woven top pattern with these oversized elasticated cuffs, and it's got this lovely boat neckline. And I'll share with you my 3 versions because I thought it might be interesting to see how they look. I made this version here in a lovely baby cord fabric that I got from Minerva. It's really lightweight and velvety, in this deep red colour. You can see the elasticated cuffs and this nice boat neckline. I've also made a colour blocked version here. This is colour blocked in 2 different colourways of a Lady McElroy cotton lawn fabric. And my final version is another Lady McElroy cotton lawn, but just one fabric. It's this floral version here that I made a little bit of a cropped version. And again, it's got this lovely boat neckline. But what I found with this pattern is the boat neckline does come up quite wide. So on all 3 of my versions, I've altered the neckline slightly to bring it in a bit at the sides, to provide a bit more bra strap coverage. So I've made a tutorial sharing with you how I make that adjustment to bring in the neckline. So I'm going to pop that tutorial in now, and I hope you'll find it useful, and I'll see you again in a moment. Welcome to my tutorial to adjust the cuff top pattern by the assembly line to bring in the neckline slightly at each side to provide a bit more bra strap coverage. And I find this is quite a quick and simple adjustment that I make on all of my cuff tops I've made. So this is the cuff top pattern by the assembly line, and as you can see it's got this really nice boat neck feature, but it does come up quite on the wide side, and I think if you make it as it is, there can be a little bit of a risk that your bra straps might peep out slightly. So I'm going to show you how to adjust each side of the neckline to bring it in, just to give that little bit more bra strap coverage. So the cuff top has 3 main pattern pieces. There is a back piece, a front piece and a neck facing piece. And you need to adjust each of these 3 pattern pieces at the neckline to bring the neckline in slightly. So I'm going to show you each of the adjustments that I make. So here is my front pattern piece for the cuff top, and this is the first pattern piece I'm going to adjust. And as you can see, I've traced it out onto some tracing paper. So I've got the shoulder seam up here and the neckline, the sleeve, and then down into the body. And I've cut all around the edges of the tracing paper except up here, which is the area I'm going to adjust. And I've left that uncut because I like to adjust directly onto the tracing paper. I just think it's a little bit easier and less fiddly. But if you have already cut out your cuff top pattern piece already, you can stick on an extra piece of paper here to make the adjustment. That is possible too. But I'll zoom in and show you the adjustment I've made. So here we've got the shoulder seam of the cuff top, and this is the line I'm going to cut along to finish the pattern piece off. And I've also added this dotted line here, which is the seam allowance. There's a 1 centimetre seam allowance on the shoulder seam. And I've added that in because this is the point at which I want to adjust the neckline. So here is my boat neckline, and the black lines show the original neckline per the pattern pieces. But I want to adjust to bring mine in, and I always make an adjustment to bring it in by 1.5 centimetres each side of the neckline. So I'll just grab my ruler and show you. I made this 1.5 centimetre line extra along the line of the seam allowance, and I want to make it at this point because this is the final seam of the top. So this is the point I want to bring it in by the full 1.5 centimetres. And I've extended out, so I've given this extra little adjustment the full seam allowance there. And then what I've done is I've brought a line down here, a new line, which sort of curves in to create the boat neckline with a new slightly brought in adjustment. So it's my new neckline here along the pink line, moving back into the black line. So it's quite a nice simple adjustment there, and I'll show you the back piece now. So here is my back pattern piece now, and again I've traced it all out and cut it out, except I've left this bit here with the tracing paper so I can adjust onto there. So again, I'll zoom in and show you I've made the same adjustment here. I've got the seam allowance here along dotted line, and I brought the seam allowance in again by the 1.5 centimetres and then extended the seam allowance out here. So I've got the full seam allowance for my extra adjusted piece. And again, I've added a new pink curve here to bring it in line with the boat neckline. And for the back pattern piece, there's slightly less adjusting needed to do here because the neckline doesn't dip quite as much at the back. But it's the same simple adjustment as for the front. So the final pattern piece that needs to be adjusted in order to bring in the boat neckline of the cuff top is the neck facing pattern piece, which I've got here. The cuff top neckline is finished by a neck facing on the inside, and you cut this pattern piece on the fold. So you end up with this side plus a mirror image once you've cut it out. And this is the centre front of the garment, and this is the centre back here, and you cut it all in one piece. So there's no seam allowance at the shoulder, but this is the shoulder seam here, and I'll zoom in to show you the adjustment. So I've got the shoulder seam highlighted as a dotted line, and I've made an adjustment to bring in the shoulder seam by 1.5 centimetres, just like I did on the front and back. So the 1.5 centimetre adjustment here. And the way I've got these curves here on the front and back is by overlaying this pattern piece onto the adjustments I've made on the front and back pattern pieces, so I'll show you that now. So here's the adjustment I made to my front pattern piece of the cuff top, and I've got my neck facing pattern piece here. And to get this curve, what I need to do is overlay this pattern piece on top of the front pattern piece here. And I need to make sure I've got my front of the neck facing to align with the front pattern piece. They both match up. So I'm going to overlay them. And the first thing I need to make sure is aligned is this seam line here, this dotted seam line. And then the second thing I need to align is this black curve here. And there is a difference of 1 centimetre here at the front here, you can see. That is because the front pattern piece is designed to be sewn with a seam allowance of 1 centimetre down the front, whereas the neck facing is cut on the fold, so there's no seam allowance there. But once I've got them lined up, what I need to do then is trace this line on, so it's just exactly the same as the line on the pattern piece below that I've adjusted. So they should be exactly identical, so that when you then cut them both out and come to sew them together, those lines should match up just right. You also need to adjust the facing so that it also mirrors the adjustment made on the back pattern piece of the cuff top too. So I've got my back pattern piece here, and here's the facing, and again you need to make sure that you're matching up the back of the facing with the back neckline. So I'm going to turn this pattern piece over and line it up here. So again, lining up the shoulder seam, and this time the centre seam does line up with the back seam here because they both have a seam allowance built in. So I've got that lined up here, and then mirror that curve. So the facing and the back pattern piece will have exactly the same adjustment there and will match up nicely when you come to sew them together. So those are the 3 adjustments I make to the cuff top pattern pieces in order to bring in the boat neckline. I adjust the neckline of the front pattern piece and the back pattern piece and the neck facing piece. But I thought it was worth mentioning there is one other pattern piece that comes with the cuff top pattern, which is this pattern piece here. And this is a pattern piece to cut out using interfacing, and then you interface the neck facing just to add a bit of stability around the neckline of the cuff top. And this interfacing pattern piece is very similar to the facing pattern piece, which is with 2 differences. It's 1 centimetre smaller at the centre back, just for the centre back seam allowance, and it's also 0.5 centimetres smaller all the way around here, which is the seam allowance for the neckline. So I actually don't bother adjusting this pattern piece to bring in the neckline on it. What I do instead is just use my neck facing piece here to cut out the interfacing, and I trim the interfacing along the back seam allowance and around the neckline seam allowance too. And I find that way it works really well and is quite nice and straightforward. So I've got my 3 adjusted pattern pieces here now, and they're all ready to cut out, and then I can put them on the fabric and cut out the fabric and start sewing my assembly line cuff top, which has a slightly adjusted neckline to bring it in by 1.5 centimetres at each side, just to make it a little bit more bra strap friendly. And I've used the 1.5 centimetre adjustment at each side, but you could adjust that if you wanted to make it slightly bigger or slightly smaller adjustment. That would work absolutely fine too. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial video and found it useful too. And I think, like I did last week with the tutorial video I did on adding ease to a tight armhole, I think again for this boat neck adjustment video, I'm going to publish it as a separate standalone video for YouTube later this week, just so more people can hopefully find it and maybe use it too, because I find pattern and fitting adjustment type videos on YouTube really useful. I've used quite a lot of them in the past, so hopefully some people may find this one helpful as well. So that's the last thing I wanted to include in this video, so thank you very much for joining me for another Midweek Chat episode. If you've enjoyed this video, as ever, I would love it if you give it a thumbs up. And I'm planning to be back again on Saturday with another video, so I'll hopefully see you again soon. But in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely week. And yes, see you on Saturday. Bye!